Good morning, stakeholders, and welcome to the Office of Procurement Regulation session on the rollout of training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements for named procurement officers. I am Tamara Roy, Head Corporate Communications, and we're extremely pleased that you're able to participate in today's session. The team who will be presenting today are Property Disposal Officer, Ms. Laura Hirulal, and Senior Capacity Development Specialist, Ms. Samantha Marchand. Before we begin the formal aspects of today's proceedings, please allow me to go through some helpful tips for a successful session. Do note that your mics will be muted. Your questions during the session can be sent via the chat option on the Teams platform. These questions will be collated by our team and addressed in our question and answer segment at the end of the session. Please keep your contributions helpful and be considerate to our presenters and other participants. At the end of today's session, you will be invited to provide your feedback. Feel free to help us improve future sessions to better match your needs by letting us know what worked well and what did not. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be shared via email and uploaded to our website. So without further delay, we will now welcome our first presenter, Ms. Laura Hirulal, who will guide us through the background, purpose, and benefits of the standard. Laura?
Good morning all, and welcome to our session on the training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements. On today's agenda, as seen on the slide, we would be presenting on the following areas. We'd firstly give an introduction to the training standards, then provide some background information, a gap analysis, looking at the benefits of the standard, how the standard is structured, the competence framework, and certification requirements. And finally, we would explore the OPR's learning management system and end off with a question and answer segment. Throughout the presentation, we'd have some pop quiz segments where you would be required to type your answers in the chat. So the main objective of today's session is to sensitize you on the training standards, the competence levels, and certification requirements as it pertains to the retention and disposal of public property. Please note that this particular training standard can be found on the OPR's website for more information. We will now move on to introducing you briefly to the standard. Let's look at what is the role of the OPR in reference to the training standard. Section 13(1)(b) of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act 2015 as amended requires that the OPR set training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements to promote best practice in procurement and, by extension, retention and disposal of public property. In setting the standard, the OPR's goal is to support the development of retention and disposal capacity, training and dissemination of information, ensuring the effective application of asset management and disposal rules through appropriate mechanisms. So the reality is that emphasis is usually placed on the procurement function alone, but it is of critical importance to highlight that when managing public property, retention and disposal management are quite essential components. Also, it is imperative to note that public property captures both personal as well as real property. As such, the capacity to retain or manage public property requires separate specialized skill set knowledge and training when managing personal as opposed to real property. Continuing with the context, after assets are procured and acquired, managing, monitoring, and maintaining the assets throughout its life is a necessary focus. This skill set is captured under retention of public property, more commonly referred to as asset and inventory management. Disposal of public property, on the other hand, requires skills to develop and execute a disposal strategy that provides the best and most feasible option to dispose of items. Therefore, through the retention and disposal of public property systems and procedures, the public sector manages its return on investment through proper management of its property by seeking maximum return on investment, including disposal, so as to aid in the achievement of value for money. Also, building a cadre of practitioners in the field of retention and disposal can translate into real financial benefits. Once equipped with the technical capability to effectively manage same, they can incorporate value-adding activities such as asset disposal planning, revenue or cost control, efficient retention or management of public property, and protection of the environment. Therefore, the purpose of the standard is to identify the knowledge, skills, and competencies required of retention and disposal practitioners in pursuit of workforce development, improved public confidence, and a globally competitive retention and disposal system. We now turn our attention to identifying and analyzing the gaps within retention and disposal of public property, which will assist those practitioners in the field to identify what are the missing processes, practices, technologies, and skills required within retention and disposal. Here, we are able to see the current state as the image shows, an unhappy face due to the issues and challenges that currently exist. The gap analysis allows us to identify the challenges or the shortcomings and identify the necessary steps to be taken to help close the gaps. That is the necessary action plan to take us to the desired state, a happy state. Since once we take the action plan is implemented, this would be the key step to bridge the gap. So let's look at an assessment of the gaps. The following methods and documents assisted in the identification of the challenges faced by public bodies in relation to retention of disposal of public property, and these would include the report of the Auditor General, the Strategic Plan October 2017 to September 2020 from Ministry of Public Administration, a White Paper 2005 Reform of the Public Sector Procurement Regime, the questionnaires issued to name procurement officers in public bodies, and requests for information letters issued to public bodies. Therefore, from the gap analysis, the following challenges were identified in the current system that are being faced with regard to retention and disposal systems. As such, public bodies are facing insufficient storage space at their facility for items identified for disposal. There is no overarching policy or standard operating procedures for disposal of assets. Information is not readily available. There is no system being used by the ministries to depreciate items each year. There's improper record keeping, making it difficult to determine the current value of items to dispose. Additional challenges faced by some public bodies is that there's limited funds allocated to the company to execute disposal, and disposal processes are considered long, tedious, and quite frustrating upon execution. We now move into the rationale for the training standard, which was revealed by the gap analysis, illustrating the importance of capacity building initiatives for setting the training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements to promote best practice in the retention and disposal of public property in Trinidad and Tobago. Currently, there are insufficient training standards, educational requirements, and competence framework for retention and disposal practitioners. Hence, setting the standards and the requirements are very critical in promoting the retention and disposal function within the public sector of Trinidad and Tobago. Let's now turn our attention to the benefits of the retention and disposal training standards to the named procurement officers. So the benefits include an improvement in overall organizational performance, ability to self-assess skills to measure knowledge and capabilities against the required competency levels, ability to identify knowledge gaps and training and development needs, and to assist with career planning and personal development, serving as a benchmark to monitor progress. So before we go into the structure of the standard, let's just have a quick pop quiz on the areas covered before. Just simply place in the chat true or false as you read the following statements. I now hand you over to Samantha to take you to this part.
Thank you, Laura. So as Laura now mentioned, question 1. Question 1 reads, the objective of this session is to sensitize on the training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements as it pertains to procurement of public property. Can you please type in the chat whether this statement is true or false? We have some answers coming in. The answer is false because the objective of this session is to sensitize on retention and disposal of public property, not public procurement. Let's move on to the second question, which reads, the rationale for developing the training standards is to provide a gap analysis to reveal the importance of capacity building, training standards, educational requirements, and competence framework, and to promote the retention and disposal function. So for question 2 is definitely true. You are correct. And the last pop-up quiz for this segment reads, the role of the OPR is to train all stakeholders in the areas of procurement, retention, and disposal of public property. Now, please type in the chat again whether this statement is true or false. False. Nice. So the answer to this statement is definitely false. The role of the OPR in this instance is to set training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements to promote best practices in procurement, retention, and disposal. So thank you guys for participating, and I will now hand you back over to Ms. Hiralal.
Okay, so now let's move into how the standard is structured. This training standard covers the pillars of retention and disposal, the competence levels, and certification requirements. The pillars of retention and disposal will consist of the core knowledge areas and capabilities that public procurement, retention, and disposal practitioners should possess. The competence levels are the competencies that describe the ability to use a set of related knowledge, skills, and attributes required to successfully perform activities and tasks in a defined setting. It will enable individuals and employers to better understand and compare the different levels of competence that exist and allow for the mobility of practitioners across public bodies. And finally, the certification requirements are what set the minimum qualification levels for practitioners operating at each competence level. Now we would look at the competence levels. So as previously stated, the competence levels will enable individuals and employers to better understand and compare the different levels that exist and allow for the mobility of practitioners across public bodies. In developing the different competence levels, that is levels 3, 4, and 5, as you see on the slide, we use the CARICOM qualifications framework as a benchmark. Within the CARICOM qualifications framework, the report identified that level 3 is the diploma or associate degree level, here referred to as the basic level. It is also stated that level 4 is the bachelor's degree level, referred to here as the intermediate level, and level 5 is the postgraduate or advanced professional level, referred to here as the advanced level. So for level 3, basic level, practitioners should possess a general knowledge and awareness within the field of retention and disposal. These individuals can be buyers, shoppers, inventory or asset management or procurement officers, financial or accounting assistant, or a receiving or distribution officer. For level 4, the intermediate level, practitioners should possess training within the field and has the ability to work independently and apply the knowledge in a comprehensive manner. This individual can be a procurement or inventory or asset supervisor, a senior procurement officer, maintenance or property officer, or a land administration officer. And level 5, the advanced level, personnel require in-depth knowledge in the field and in-depth experience and the ability to apply knowledge in a strategic manner. This person can be a procurement or asset management officer, chief procurement officer, commercial manager, procurement director, or land and buildings manager. Here we have the competence infrastructure, which gives a brief description of each level of competence. For the basic level here, the practitioner should possess basic knowledge and awareness of laws, regulations, and guidelines in relation to retention and disposal of public property. They must have an understanding of property or inventory tracking and stores and inventory management systems, and be able to keep proper inventory records and continuously review the level of inventory or property. The practitioner must ensure that data is reconciled to reflect the property records and adjust the records to accommodate discrepancies. This level would be someone who has 2 years related work experience in a property, stores, or inventory clerk support role with relevant training and possesses a diploma in property or asset inventory management. For the intermediate level, or level 4, practitioners should possess training, the ability to work independently, and apply extensive knowledge of property and inventory management, ensuring that assets are managed according to developed policies and procedures in place and according to laws. They must also possess knowledge of standardized property disposal procedures, regulations or operations, and have extensive experience in generating reports that vary from simple to complex analysis. A practitioner at this level should have 3 years of experience in the field of property management and/or property disposal and have for personal property a first degree in general property, asset or inventory management or a related field, or for real property, a certificate or diploma in property or real estate management, or a certificate in land administration or management. And finally, for the advanced level, level 5, practitioners would possess in-depth knowledge, experience, and the ability to apply knowledge in a strategic manner. They would lead the retention and disposal function and support the achievement of the public body's strategic mandate in keeping with the public procurement and disposal of public property legislation, as well as make recommendations for improvements in the performance of their functions. This practitioner should have strategic retention and disposal of property or asset experience and expertise, as illustrated by 8 years of progressive experience in the field. Managing high-risk, high-value property management projects that are of strategic significance to operations and execution of successful property disposal processes would be an asset. This person would also have for personal property a postgraduate degree in procurement or supply chain or property management, or for real property, land administration, real estate or facilities management, or a related field. So now we move on to the 5 pillars of retention and disposal, which are seen on the screen. So pillar 1, we have governance and compliance. Pillar 2, significant planning. Pillar 3, managing demand. Pillar 4, performance management, and Pillar 5, people. These 5 pillars of retention and disposal consist of the core knowledge areas and capabilities that public procurement, retention, and disposal practitioners should possess. Now we move into the competence framework for retention and disposal of public property. The competence framework for retention of public property, that is both real and personal property, and disposal of personal property, identifies the competencies, that is the knowledge and the skills, that retention and disposal practitioners should possess at different functional or competency levels. So here, this table identifies the 5 pillars of retention and disposal that make up the competence framework. The table showed different areas that would be captured under the relevant pillars. So again, pillar 1 is seen in the yellow color, is that of governance and compliance. Pillars 2 and 3, which is significant planning and managing demand, have been combined to capture both the retention aspect, which we can see in orange, and the disposal aspect, which we can see here in blue. Pillar 4, which is green, represents performance management, and pillar 5 in purple represents people. Now, before we go into the content and details within each pillar, we'd have another short pop quiz, and now Samantha will take you through this.
Okay, hi, get ready again. So the first statement reads, competence levels are the competencies that describe the ability to use a set of related knowledge, skills, and attributes required to successfully perform activities and tasks in a defined setting. Please type your answer in the chat whether the statement is true or false. Yes, nice. So the answer for this statement is true. Question 2. How many pillars are there altogether for retention and disposal? Now, this is not a true or false question, so you could type in the chat whether it is 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 pillars. I see you guys have been paying attention. The answer is definitely 5. And the last question for this segment reads, 2 pillars have been combined to cover both the retention and disposal aspects. What are these pillars? It's pillars 2 and 3, which is planning and managing demand for the retention and disposal function. Thank you guys for participating again, and I will now hand you over to Ms. Roy, our moderator.
Thanks so much, Samantha and Laura. At this time, we will take a 5-minute break. We will place a timer on the screen. And when we get back, we will go through the 5 pillars of retention and disposal. So see you back in 5. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We will now continue on with the presentations. Laura Hirla will take you through the 5 pillars of retention and disposal. Laura?
So welcome back, everyone. Let's go straight into describing pillar 1 from this table, which is governance and compliance. Note that after each pillar, we will have a pop quiz. Right, so pillar 1 is based on governance and compliance and focuses on how retention and disposal functions are individually coordinated and managed. Before we go into the content, I would just give an overview of what these tables with the information going forward would cover. As such, the tables would identify the focus areas under each pillar and then expand on the knowledge and competencies to be gained at each level, that is at levels 3, 4, and 5. So governance and compliance is the first area where we capture legislative framework, which allow practitioners to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding of the legislative and regulatory framework that governs the retention and disposal of public property in Trinidad and Tobago. Here, practitioners at the different levels should understand the governance requirements that is in compliance with the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act and regulations. We now look at the next heading, knowledge and competencies at each level that is applicable for both retention and disposal of public property. As such, level 3, the basic level, practitioners must have general knowledge and awareness of retention and disposal of public property related legislation and applicable policy, handbooks, and general guidelines for practical application. They must understand the purpose and objectives, as well as the implications and effects of the legislation for the retention and disposal function, and complies with professional and other applicable codes of conduct and ethical standards. The intermediate level practitioners must understand the process required for good practice and to operate within the legislative framework, as well as the ability to undertake risk assessment activities and ensures compliance with the objects of the Act. They must ensure that the applicable legislation and its principles are being adhered to in all aspects of retention and disposal of public property, and have the ability to provide recommendations for improvement in internal control procedures and general operations to ensure compliance. At the advanced level, practitioners should display use of expert knowledge gained on legislative framework to interpret legislation and assess the impact upon the management function, as well as the ability to develop recommendations for future management procedures, policy, governance, and compliance implications of legislation to ensure full and effective communication and management. They would be able to assess opportunities and risks associated with the given legislation and standards on current retention and disposal of public property practices and processes, and ensures that the functional approach aligns with the wider government's mandate for effective property management practices in Trinidad and Tobago. Another area under Pillar 1, which also informs governance and compliance, is that of internal controls, which guide the public bodies to achieve their mission or goals and define the way practitioners and stakeholders act as they undertake retention and disposal activities. The knowledge and competencies required at each level for internal controls would now be examined. So for the basic level, that is level 3, practitioners must be aware of ethical conduct throughout the job cycle and adheres to the organizational standards, code of conduct, and values relevant to the level of responsibility, as well as understand the use of internal controls in the retention and disposal of public property. They must understand the use of mitigation strategies and control activities to prevent breaches of the internal control process, and be aware of common examples of conflict of interest, declares any conflicts of interest, and understand and advises on how to report any deviations from these principles. For the intermediate level, practitioners must be able to communicate and monitor the use of the internal control framework, as well as ensure management directives to mitigate risk and carry out internal control activities towards the achievement of objectives. They must be able to understand the impact of non-compliance on organizational behaviors, standards, and values, and exemplifies compliance in their day-to-day conduct, promoting it in all tasks, and maintains internal reports and guidance documents on standards and business conduct, and updates these regularly to ensure compliance. And for the advanced level, practitioners should be able to establish and monitor the quality and use of an effective internal control system, as well as develop a mechanism for ensuring adequate segregation of duties for the function. They must be able to apply standards of business conduct and leads on the identification of key issues and breaches across the function, and manage the development of standards of business conduct for retention and disposal, as well as ensures alignment with these standards and their application within the public body, and ascertains whether the internal control components are present and functioning. The last area under Pillar 1, Governance and Compliance, is the use of standardized forms, essentially disposal forms. Standardized frameworks underpin transparency in information and reduce the potential for inconsistent practices. Here, practitioners should be able to improve the efficiency and effectiveness in the disposal process for public property. The knowledge and competencies at the basic level, practitioners should have an awareness of the appropriate standardized forms to be utilized for the execution of the disposal process, as well as the ability to complete the forms. At the intermediate level, practitioners must have an understanding of the use of the appropriate forms and the ability to complete same, as well as the ability to edit and provide recommendations for improvement. Finally, at the advanced level, practitioners must have the knowledge and competency requirements, which involve the ability to understand the standardized disposal forms for approval, as well as the knowledge of compliance with approved forms and the ability to sensitize and provide training for others in the use of same, and seek to develop recommendations for customization of the form, as well as approve modifications in consultation with relevant stakeholders. So as we come to the end of this pillar, I would now hand you over to Samantha, who will take you through our next pop quiz.
Okay, participants, are you ready? Question 1. What are the 3 topics captured under Pillar 1, which refers to governance and compliance? You can type in the chat whether it's A, legislative framework or internal controls or use of standardized disposal forms, B, policy or guidelines, disposal process or asset management, or is it C, both A and B? Is A. Let's move on to question 2. Which topic under Pillar 1 is this statement a description of? This area can assist bodies to achieve their mission or goals and defines the way practitioners and stakeholders act. It provides a framework of accountability for the activities and includes some key aspects of legislation and supporting guidelines. Please type in the chat whether the answer is A, legislative framework, B, internal controls, or C, use of standardized disposal forms. So the answer for question 2 is B, internal controls. And the final question for this segment reads, which topic under Pillar 1 is this statement a description of? To develop knowledge and understanding of the legislative and regulatory framework, governance requirements, and to consider how these requirements can be implemented in operations. Is it A, legislative framework, B, internal controls, or C, use of standardized disposal forms? So for question 3 is A, legislative framework. Thank you guys for participating and being as smart as you are. I will now hand you back over to Ms. Hiralal.
Okay, so now as we look at the retention aspect, pillars 2 and 3 have been combined to capture retention in terms of the significant retention or asset management planning and managing demand. These pillars would focus on the aspects of planning how to manage the total portfolio of significant assets retained and those identified for disposal, and planning for individual categories of property, both real and personal property. It also refers to how well demand for assets are managed over their life to optimize performance and realize expected benefits from retention. The policy or special guideline is the first area that falls under this pillar. This area would provide the practitioners responsible for policy development with the requirements for developing same and the application of good governance principles for retention and disposal of public property. For the basic level, practitioners must have an understanding of the public body's general procedure and policy as it relates to retention and disposal and its alignment with the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act. The practitioners must understand the basic requirements and the qualities of a good policy or special guideline and be able to conduct and identify best practice research for possible inclusion into said policy special guideline. At level 4, which is intermediate level, practitioners must be able to perform the practical steps for developing an effective policy or special guideline and ensure its alignment with the Act, as well as identify the processes and procedures for inclusion in the policy to highlight any discrepancies. Practitioners must decide on the appropriate standardized forms for inclusion into the policy to aid in the successful execution of the process, and analyzes the best practice research undertaken for inclusion into the policy or special guideline. And at the advanced level, practitioners must guide the overall policy or special guidelines development procedure and formulate advice and recommendations. They must also examine any discrepancies identified and develop solutions to combat same. Another area under the planning stage is that of risk management, where practitioners can seek to adopt a risk-based approach to protect and maintain public property, both personal and real property, that have been entrusted to the public body. This would ensure that performance is maximized and that the value of the asset is preserved or enhanced through risk management planning. So at the basic level, practitioners must be able to identify the likely risk of personal property of low value being retained and what type of risk they may be exposed to, such as loss, fire, theft, etc. Practitioners should be able to assess the significance and likelihood of the risk which is likely to threaten the retention of personal property of low value. They should also be able to develop a risk management register for personal property of low value, where the identified risk can be input and identify the mechanisms that can be used to mitigate the identified risks of the personal property. The intermediate level practitioners must identify the likely risk of personal property of high value and real property retained, and their level of exposure to risk such as natural disaster, fire, loss, etc. They should be able to conduct preliminary risk analysis by assessing the significance and likelihood of the risk to threaten the retention of personal property of high value and real property, as well as develop a risk management register for same, where the identified risk can be input and recommendations can be made on mechanisms to minimize the disruption of the retention function. The advanced level practitioners must be able to develop approaches to mitigate the impact of risk on the retention function that can adversely affect the public body, as well as monitor all risk management registers and other associated mechanisms to facilitate appropriate actions to minimize disruption and associated costs on the retention function. They must also ensure that all mechanisms and actions taken are in alignment with the Act and the regulations and use expert market knowledge gained to analyze and communicate risk management strategies to address potential and emerging risk from external influences. The next area under this pillar is public property maintenance planning. This area would provide practitioners with the knowledge and skills required in the maintenance of public property to ensure that they remain in proper working condition and to enhance the property's performance. At the basic level, practitioners must be able to demonstrate proper record keeping of public property belonging to the public body in their respective database or asset management system, including all past and future maintenance information to be performed, as well as the ability to perform inspection to highlight any issues or immediate action or maintenance that may be required for proper functioning of identified property. At the intermediate level, practitioners should be able to develop and implement a maintenance plan for all public property owned by the public body, requiring maintenance and determine the types of maintenance required and evaluate between in-house or outsourced resources to prepare appropriate maintenance strategies. And at the advanced level, practitioners would be able to examine their maintenance plan and make suggestions or recommendations for areas of improvement and inclusion of other pertinent areas not captured, as well as evaluate the feasibility of maintenance options using financial tools such as net present value and future value, as well as life cycle costing, and give authorization for maintenance to be performed. Personal property management. This area would help practitioners to successfully operate in the day-to-day management of personal property, as well as be aware of the practical issues that exist within the retention or management of personal property. Basic level practitioners must be able to understand the record keeping of personal property in the asset or stores and inventory management system, with information from purchasing and receiving documentation, in addition to information gained from a physical inspection of the property. They would also understand the importance of reporting receipts, identification, movement, maintenance, and other areas as it relates to proper asset or property management and ensures that property is safeguarded and its existence verified. At the intermediate level, practitioners must be able to measure compliance of the asset with established standards, systems, trends, identification of areas of concern, by highlighting exceptional levels of compliance for each item of personal property. They should also be able to initiate and assemble the structure of the stores and inventory management system by providing a logical layout design to facilitate the presentation for interpretation, to generate reports, input information to track accountability, as well as information for depreciation and financial purposes. And lastly, they should identify and document potential issues or challenges. And at the advanced level, practitioners must assure the assets owned for which the organization is accountable are adequately controlled, protected, preserved, and maintained to maximize their useful life and provide the best possible return on investment. They should be able to understand the importance of developing an efficient and effective communication strategy for proper property management, as well as address and solve issues feasibly through development of risk mitigating solutions or strategies and through consultation with subject matter experts. The next area is real property management, which generally provide practitioners with an understanding of the basic tools, techniques, and knowledge required for effective real property management, as well as the issues that exist within the retention or management of real property. At the basic level, practitioners must possess an understanding of the key roles and responsibilities in real property management and be able to record details of real property owned by the public body in the asset management, stores, and inventory management system, along with additional information gained from a physical inspection of the property. At the intermediate level, practitioners must be able to create an asset management plan for each real property owned by the public body, as well as assemble the structure of the property management system and provide a logical layout design for interpretation to input information. They must also be able to generate effective reports to validate the details of each real property owned by the public body. Such reports should include activity of the property, compliance being met, any loss or damage to the property, and any other detail as it relates to real property management. And at the advanced level, practitioners must ensure that real property for which the organization is accountable for are adequately controlled, protected, preserved, and maintained to maximize their useful life, as well as explore the various methods of valuing property to differentiate among the various methods and best practices. They must also be able to address and solve issues in the most feasible manner by developing risk mitigation solutions or strategies. Stores or warehousing and distribution management go hand in hand, as warehousing allows for the timely delivery and optimized distribution. Both are very critical within the property management function. Understanding this would allow practitioners to store and dispatch items or property or assets in a way that benefits the organization. And so, practitioners at the basic level must be able to develop the ability to input current and accurate information into a record system or asset management database for the storage, receipt, issuance, and distribution of personal property, as well as understand the different types of storage space that exists within the warehouse for certain types of property. At the intermediate level, practitioners must be able to draft policies and procedures for proper operation and distribution within a warehouse facility, such as property marking, identification, barcoding, distribution channels to be considered, and ensure that all property have been accounted for and generate reports to specify the type of property being stored, the type of storage facility, and the type of warehouse facility to be adopted. At the advanced level, practitioners must oversee the cost of warehousing and distribution as part of the budget process and approve the storage facility to be utilized, warehouse layout, and all other financial decisions as it relates to the warehouse. They must also be able to provide general oversight of the process and provide approval for significant requests or changes to storage or warehousing and distribution systems. Inventory or record management is a critical function of the organization, since well-organized records can help the organization to gain control over documents. practitioners should be able to apply proper inventory control and records management skills, as well as utilize technology or software programs to manage inventory or property or asset record management throughout its useful life and the identification of same for disposal. At the basic level, practitioners must be able to create, store, organize, and maintain the retention and disposal of all public property information in accordance with established procedures, preserves records, and ensures that they are easily accessible and regularly updated, as well as be able to understand and identify the goals and objectives of inventory management within the public body. At the intermediate level, practitioners must identify the mechanisms and techniques for promoting a good document or records management system, ensuring that the record management system is in compliance with existing legislation, regulation, and standards until they are ready to be disposed of, and allow practitioners to consider the specific details and type of items or public property to be recorded. And at the advanced level, practitioners must be able to design, initiate, or enforce an effective document management system, either electronic and paper-based, undertake regular management of policy, plan, and system review of records, and have knowledge of industry concerns and issues related to record keeping in the digital or information age, and develop strategies for proper management. Public property or asset portfolio. This area is about the assiduous management of property or asset portfolio that can help improve the property's profitability. And so, practitioners can monitor overheads, reduce costs, and allow refinancing, which can enhance the property's performance. Public property or asset portfolio area can help improve the property's profitability. Regular review of a property or asset portfolio is a very important element of property management, especially to aid in timely identification of items requiring disposal. At the basic level, practitioners must be able to develop the capacity to compile the estimated annual spend on all public property owned by the public body and be able to identify the categories of public property that are considered significant, that is high value and or high risk, which require greater attention and effort. At the intermediate level, practitioners must be able to compile and analyze the historical spend on public property and use the data to determine strategies to realize short and long-term savings and conduct regular assessments of public property portfolios to determine ways property can be enhanced, refurbished, and those that require a high level of maintenance. At the advanced level, practitioners must ensure that information and organizational processes necessary for the management of public property portfolio are available and implemented, as well as review and verify the list of assets identified from the portfolio for disposal, and is able to use same to aid in preparation of a disposal plan. Our last area in this pillar as it pertains our last area of this pillar is annual disposal plan, which is an essential component of sound public property management, since the disposal of public property accounts for a significant part of the full life cycle cost. The practitioner should be able to have an overall understanding of forecast for future public property disposals, cash flow forecasts, identifying income associated expenditures, and the stages of disposal planning. At the basic level, practitioners must be able to source information from an asset management system or through physical identification and continue to review property portfolio for identification of any updates on property initially identified for disposals or reporting of any newly discovered items to add to the list of disposals. The intermediate level practitioners are required to assess in detail public property identified by the asset strategy as surplus to service delivery requirements and identify opportunities for increasing public property value before their disposal. They should also be able to collate and draft the plan using the research and data provided and submit for review and final approval. And finally, at the advanced level, practitioners would have to contribute to strategic aspects and finalization of the disposal plan and implement the disposal plan and monitor performance. So now I'll hand you back over to Samantha, who will take you through the pop quiz for this section.
Hi guys, welcome back to our pop quiz segment. Our first statement, you can type in the chat whether the statement is true or false. The second pillar is called governance and compliance. Is this statement true or false? So the answer to this first quiz is false because the second pillar is called retention or asset management, planning and managing demand. Let's move to our second question statement. Pillars 2 and 3 have been combined for the retention, planning and managing demand. Is this statement true or false? Answer is true. Now the final pop quiz for this segment. Annual disposal planning is not part of the retention, planning and managing demand. Please type in the chat whether the statement is true or false. And you're definitely correct. The answer is false. Annual disposal planning is a part of the retention, planning and managing demand. Thank you guys once again for participating and being active. I will now hand you over to Ms. Roy, our moderator.
Thank you so much, Samantha. So once again, we will go to another 5-minute break. And when we return, we will continue with Laura presenting on the 5 pillars of retention and disposal. So see you back in 5. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So as promised, we will continue with our presentation on the 5 pillars of retention and disposal, inviting Laura to the mic.
All right, so now we will be continuing with pillars 2 and 3. We now look at the disposal aspect, where pillars 2 and 3 have been combined to capture disposal in terms of the significant disposal, planning and managing demand. These pillars would focus on 2 aspects: planning how to manage the total portfolio of assets identified for disposal, and planning for individual categories of property, both real and personal. It also refers to how well demand for assets are managed to obtain significant value from disposal. All right, so the first area captured under these pillars is that of property disposition or placement. Property disposition or placement starts the disposal process and can be defined as the processes involved in the removal of personal property from use. This also includes consideration of the reason for disposal, as well as the preparation of the property for disposal and so removal from use. At the basic level, one should be able to develop a categorized list of goods to be disposed, documents the request for disposal and the reasons. They should have the ability to understand and identify the hazardous items and intangible property owned by the public body and those that require disposal, ensuring that they are properly labeled and marked. At the intermediate level, the practitioner should verify items identified for disposal through comparison of physical and system or book records, ensuring their correct location, condition, status, etc. They should also ensure that personnel responsible for the handling of hazardous items are provided with the appropriate personal protective equipment, PPE, and ensure that all disposal preparation methods are executed in alignment with the approved strategy. At the advanced level, the practitioner must gain knowledge of legal liability and breach of privacy legislation. They should develop and implement appropriate policies and procedures for disposal of hazardous items and intangible property, and gain knowledge of execution process for preparing items for disposal. The next area is property valuation or appraisal, which can play an important part in the efficient and effective disposal of items. And so, this competence area is where practitioners should have an understanding of executing a valuation of identified property to determine its current value, which is essential to the success of the disposal process. At the basic level, the practitioner should have an understanding of the factors, the principles, and implications that may affect the valuation of property for disposal. At the intermediate level, practitioners must be able to determine if an expert valuation is needed and considers acquisition cost, market value, replacement cost, actual physical condition of items, book value, residual value, and so on. At the advanced level, practitioners must deliberate on the appropriate appraised value to determine the minimum sale or bid price and have the ability to compute appraisal of items and generate reports as applicable. Electronic disposals. So this is another area in which practitioners should know in order to effectively plan and manage e-auction or forward auctions and how to best use this approach. At the basic level, one must be able to understand the benefits and the different types of electronic disposal methods that exist, especially the e-auction or forward auction concepts and how they work, as well as develop the ability to identify what type of property should be disposed electronically and able to use the software chosen for electronic disposal. At the intermediate level, the practitioner must ensure and verify that accurate information regarding the disposal is provided and that they work effectively and be able to absorb complex data and communicate same at all levels. And at level 5, practitioners must develop expert knowledge in the use of e-disposal tools and be aware of the influences of the use and implementation of e-disposal technology. They must also develop and implement the appropriate policies and procedures for the use of electronic disposal and understand and present complex ideas to both technical and non-technical audiences, as well as communicate the potential impact of emerging technologies on the public body and individuals. Now we move on to practical issues in disposal. It is important for the practitioner to understand and be able to identify any issues that may arise during or after the execution of the disposal process and address those issues accordingly. This will allow practitioners to improve their own disposal processes. At the basic level, the knowledge and competencies would include the practitioner's ability to conduct research into best practices in disposal processes and contribute to support improvement of disposal processes. At the intermediate level, a practitioner should be able to develop the knowledge of the issues that exist in disposal, as well as identify and document potential issues or challenges, and develop possible risk mitigation solutions or strategies. At the advanced level, practitioners must develop expert knowledge and understand the issues that exist in disposal. They should be able to develop and implement mechanisms to prevent issues from occurring to ensure compliance with the Act, handbook, and guidelines, and apply knowledge gained to address and solve issues in the most feasible manner. Here we move on to the strategy development part of disposal planning and managing demand. Within the competence area of disposal methods, practitioners should have the experience and knowledge to take into consideration all possible methods of disposal and the accompanying procedures for executing each. They should also consider the benefit and costs as well as the estimated income and expenditure to aid in selecting the most feasible method that provides the best value for the organization. Basic level practitioners must have general knowledge of the different methods of disposal and have the ability to assess the pros and cons of all disposal method options. Intermediate level practitioners must consider procedures for each method of disposal, evaluates and examines all feasible methods of disposal, as well as be able to evaluate the best disposal option by conducting a cost-benefit analysis. The advanced level practitioners must select the preferred and most feasible and cost-effective disposal option, having considered all factors, and be able to develop a disposal strategy report. The next area, disposal strategy development, focuses on determining the disposal needs or conditions to meet the items identified for disposal. Hence, a practitioner here should take into account possible conflicting requirements of the various stakeholders, analyzing, documenting, validating, and managing disposal requirements. At the basic level, practitioners must understand the public body's internal handbook and guidelines, based on disposal, as well as the importance of the disposal strategy development report, and undertake necessary research to obtain information to support the different disposal methods. Intermediate practitioners must analyze research on the different disposal methods, conduct disposal requirement analysis, execute stakeholder and market analysis, as well as weigh the options of disposal and draft the strategy development report. Practitioners at the advanced level should review the disposal requirement analysis, stakeholder and market analysis, and strategy development reports for finalization. Within the significant disposal planning, we also have disposal execution, and so to capture that area, disposal action management is seen. A practitioner should be able to identify the significant risk and their treatments to ensure a managed and effective disposal outcome. At the basic level, a practitioner would be able to identify and examine the possible risk that may occur in the disposal process, as well as record keeping of the disposal process, with checklists to ensure completion of all tasks or areas before proceeding with disposal action. At the intermediate level, a practitioner must be able to assess or determine the possible risk management solutions for the risks identified in the disposal process and be aware of the challenges encountered in execution of the disposal. At the advanced level, a practitioner must be able to contribute to the risk management process and provide expert advice and consultation in executing the same and manage and execute the approved disposal action.
Okay, guys, now we're going to have our pop quiz for this segment, and let's go to question 1. Property disposition involves which of the following? Is it A, the removal of personal property from use? B, preparation of the property for disposal? C, consideration of the reason for disposal? Or D, all of the above? Please type your answer in the chat. Nice, a lot of these are coming in and you are definitely correct. It is all of the above. Question 2. Disposal action management involves which of the following? Is it A, determining the disposal needs or conditions? B, identifying the significant risk and their treatments to ensure a managed and effective disposal outcome? Or is it C, movement of property identified for disposal? Be nice. So the answer for question 2 is definitely B. And now we're going to move on to the final question for this segment, and it's a true or false question. So the statement reads, selecting the most feasible disposal method provides the best value for the public body. Is it true or false? Definitely true. I'll give you guys a round of applause. Yay. Thank you again for participating, and I will now hand you back over to Ms. Hiralal.
So now we will move on to pillar 4, performance management. So this pillar is based on the collection, collation, and analysis of information on targets set and results achieved, as well as its application to support good retention and disposal performance. Those targets or results to be achieved should be set based on the SMART criteria, which is a guide in setting goals and objectives. The SMART criteria refers to goals or objectives that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So the first area, performance measurement and management, is key to assist the practitioner in managing the outputs, deliverables, and key performance indicators of a public body's performance in executing the retention and disposal of public property function. Public bodies or practitioners should utilize the SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound criteria in developing their deliverables and key performance indicators. At the basic level, practitioners must be able to collate and provide details for specific reporting in relation to the applicable aspect of the legislation, that is the Act and regulations, as well as the handbook and guidelines for retention of public property and disposal of personal property. They should also be able to identify any performance gaps and trends in retention and disposal, report and make preliminary recommendations or suggestions for improvement of same. At the intermediate level, practitioners should undertake performance monitoring, provide guidance through data collection and gathering, and time management of individual performance through agreed objectives. They should also play a significant role in the performance measurement against targets and create improvement plans when necessary, and prepare improvement reports for the area based on the applicable legislation, handbook, and guidelines. And a practitioner at the advanced level must proactively drive, support, and endorse performance management practices. They must be instrumental in developing retention and disposal strategies, setting of targets and indicators for the public body accordingly, and is highly experienced in identifying and negotiating milestones and monitoring performance. They should also be able to provide a strong focus on quality, on-time delivery of retention and disposal activity, and report on all these elements to senior management and other stakeholders. Another area under this pillar is the implementation of appropriate continuous improvement methodologies, which is fundamentally important for practitioners to undertake root cause analysis, assess opportunities and appraisal options, which can contribute to cost savings and improved value. At the basic level, practitioners must identify problems relating to ineffective retention and disposal processes and practices by collecting data and monitoring performance. They must monitor compliance with current practices and identify areas of improvement for unachievable performance standards, as well as evaluate lessons learned and communicate same to stakeholders. Practitioners at the intermediate level identify and practice ways of delivering value through effective and improved retention and disposal of public property processes through cost and quality. They would research and create benchmarks of processes or performance of the public body's retention and disposal function, and set up forums and mechanisms for continuous feedback and reviews recommendations for improvement on a frequent basis as a way of producing change. And at the advanced level, practitioners should develop a culture of continuous improvement and devise root cause analysis to evaluate problems experienced and apply strategic methods for the development of improvement plans. We now look at the last pillar that make up the competence framework for retention and disposal of public property, and that is people, which is a very important pillar which relates to the staff resources undertaking retention and disposal activities, including people development and staff expertise. So for Pillar 5, we look at the stakeholder relationship management, in which practitioners can identify situations and interactions where specific relationship management methods may be applied to improve the contribution of the retention and disposal function. Hence, practitioners are required to have an in-depth understanding of complex customer and stakeholder relationships. Managing expectations through a controlled process ensures credibility, buy-in, and support. The basic level requires practitioners to develop and maintain relationships through effective communications with internal and external stakeholders, to promote effective retention and disposal processes, as well as advise stakeholders on the interpretation of internal handbooks and guidelines for retention and disposal, as well as offer routine advice to internal stakeholders on related issues. At the intermediate level, practitioners must monitor the work of internal stakeholders to ensure that they understand and comply with requirements and promote the work of retention and disposal from a position of influence to internal stakeholders across the public body. They should also motivate colleagues and other internal stakeholders to achieve their commitment to the work of the job function, as well as contribute to the development of special guidelines that represent retention and disposal, whilst liaising with internal and external stakeholders to develop networks, strategies, and plans for management and implementation of same. At the advanced level, practitioners must be interpersonally savvy and relate well to all types of people, both inside and outside of the public body, and build effective relationships which are constructive and appropriate for their purpose. They should also manage the expectations of the relationship through a controlled process and identify a range of situations through interactions for providing consulting and counseling advice. Practitioners can further adopt the appropriate interpersonal style and can use negotiation strategies as applicable to evaluate stakeholder plans to achieve effective retention and disposal, and create communication plans to achieve the buy-in for asset management and disposal plans by internal and external stakeholders. The last area under Pillar 5 looks at effective communication. Within this competence area, practitioners should possess effective communication that can help build their credibility and that of the organization, hence raising the profile of the retention and disposal function. So at the basic level, practitioners must create well-written correspondence on behalf of the team under guidance and be a good communicator and experienced in using multiple communication methods. They should also be able to engage and interact in meetings and discussions and provide input as required, as well as demonstrate good listening skills and respond appropriately. Practitioners must share appropriate work-related information and be able to present data in an effective and meaningful way for use by others in the public body. Practitioners at the intermediate level should understand the importance of well-written communications and require limited verification of work. They must provide guidance on written correspondence as well and present well-structured, precise information, as well as be an effective presenter who can read the audience's behavior and position and adapt their style accordingly. They should know when to listen and can ask questions to clarify understanding, as well as identify and maintain information flows and contact with colleagues who depend on them or who influence their work. And at the advanced level, practitioners must be a consummate communicator who is able to adapt to the audience as and when necessary. They should continually foster and encourage new and different ways of communication, as well as use expert knowledge in written communications with all levels across the public sector. They should be able to issue written communications that impact on strategic operations or influences the direction of the retention of public property activities. I will now hand you over to Samantha for the pop quiz.
Okay, guys, get ready. This is our final quiz for the morning. And it's a statement. You type again in the chat whether the statement is true or false. The collection, collation, and analysis of information on targets set and results achieved, as well as its application to support good retention and disposal performance is Pillar 5, whilst Pillar 4 relates to the staff resources undertaking retention and disposal activities, including people development and staff expertise. Is the statement true or false? So the answer for our final quiz of the day, it's false, because it's the other way around. Pillar 4 is about performance management and Pillar 5 is about people. Thank you again for participating. I will now hand you back over to Ms. Hiradal, who will take you through the way forward.
So as we near the end of the presentation, let's look at the way forward. The professionalization of the retention disposal function is a strategic lever for improved outcomes. Having the right combination of skills and competencies can reduce costs, deliver value for money, and drive ethical and sustainable outcomes in the changing business environment. To achieve the desired outcomes for retention and disposal by the reform program, there is a need for greater commitment to the development of retention and disposal capacity across public bodies with the backing of relevant human resource professionals to support its organization by acquiring the right people with the appropriate skills, knowledge, and competencies. We have now come to the end of our presentation of the training standard, competence level, and certification requirements for the area of retention and disposal. I will now hand you back over to Samantha, who would give a brief introduction into the OPR's learning management system at this point, which would aid in capacity building for this area.
Thank you, Laura. And hi again. So I will briefly let's get a little understanding on the OPR's learning management system. The OPR would have briefly introduced its learning management system in September of 2021 when we rolled out the training standards, competence levels, and certification requirements for public procurement. I will now introduce a little more details of the OPR's learning management system. The OPR has acquired a learning management system, also called LMS. The OPR's LMS is expected to provide a new learning experience for local and foreign suppliers or contractors, local public bodies, and the staff of the OPR. It will provide interactive content relating to the Act, the regulations, handbooks and guidelines, systems, policies, procedures, and processes. So what is a learning management system? A learning management system, or LMS, is a web-based software application that automates training, administers assessments, tracks and collates reports on the performance of learners. So how will the OPR's LMS function? The OPR would develop and upload content in the LMS relating to the 4 stages of public procurement proceedings and the retention and disposal process. Users will have access to this content and will be able to review it on demand. For instance, once content is uploaded, learners who may be named procurement officers, accounting officers, human resource officers, or even suppliers or contractors will be provided with usernames and passwords to access the system. The OPR will also monitor the progress of the learners, and once a learner has successfully completed the different training modules by attaining the passing score, certificates of participation would be issued by the OPR. The OPR envisages that this platform will transform its capacity building interventions by enabling us to better serve you, our stakeholders, through the delivery of mobile-friendly content that is accessible on demand, thus improving availability. From a monitoring perspective, the platform will assist the OPR in tracking and reporting on the progress of its learners, allowing us to target our interventions where it is needed most. Through this LMS platform, the OPR will be revolutionizing the delivery of its capacity building program. Now let's look at the benefits of the OPR's LMS. All e-learning materials is stored in one location, which is a cloud-based system. This reduces the risk of losing important data. It provides access to the public procurement, retention, and disposal of public property e-learning materials at any time on any device. Once the OPR uploads course materials onto the LMS and publish them, learners can access the information they need. Even those who are on the go can log in to the e-learning platform via their smartphones and tablets. So you don't have to wait until your next online training session to access the material. It can also easily track learner progress and performance. This means the LMS gives the OPR the ability to keep track of learner progress and allows learners the ability to track their own progress to ensure that they are meeting their targets. The LMS also includes a reporting and analytics feature that allows the OPR to pinpoint areas that require additional work, as well as where learners are excelling. So for instance, if learners are struggling with a particular lesson, we can access the e-learning content and make modifications if necessary. Another benefit is that it reduces training and development costs. The LMS reduces training and development costs which allows learners to access their training online, which means that a sizable sum of training and development costs can be reduced. For instance, the cost of printing and booking a venue, since the training material would now be available on the LMS platform. LMS can even reduce online training and development time. It gives learners only the information they need in a direct and organized manner that can be accessed at a convenient time allowing them to simply click on the online modules they need and complete the material in a fraction of a time. It also allows the OPR to test our learners' knowledge with our quizzes, assessments, and interactive projects. And the LMS allows public bodies and suppliers or contractors to stay up to date with current procurement regulations. In this way, the OPR's LMS is an invaluable tool. So in closing, let us look at the status of implementing our LMS. The OPR is continuously creating and uploading content onto the LMS. In November of last year, the OPR commenced a pilot test with our internal stakeholders to ensure that there are no issues in preparation for our launch to public bodies. And during this year, the OPR will be launching the LMS to public bodies. This now brings me to the end of my presentation,